Okay, so for those that, for the other half that don't know what we are doing here, we are trying to research subjective or lived or just experience. All these adjectives are a little bit redundant because experience could hardly be anything but subjective. But normally in literature we find these terms. We want to know what it's like to be human. We would like to know how people experience emotions, how people experience thoughts. So for example, we were just talking this week, about experience of thinking, and we are very clear that we are not so much interested in the content, but in the way it presents itself in our experience, in our consciousness. And that goes for the emotions, that goes for, or we normally call them feelings in this area. This goes for the sense of self, the sense of the world, and so on. So this is what we are researching. And I am trying to deal with this elusive topic for like 20 years. Before that, I was a theoretical physicist, so that was a little bit of a step. And I did find immediately when I started thinking about how I could approach human experience, I sort of encountered one very simple, but I think very profound question. And I would like you all to ponder on this question together with me. And it will also explain the title of my talk. So just find your right hand within your experience. Can you do that? Is that okay? Can you feel your right hand? Yes, I'm getting some nodding. Okay. The question is, so just stay a couple of seconds with this experience of the right hand. You can choose palm or some other part or the whole. And then tell me, what do you think? Was this experience that you found there before, or did you construct it in some way by the gesture of directing attention? And I would like you to sort of choose one of the three. I intentionally removed D out, which was other, because I felt we could go into a deep discussion with our thinking part of the group. And so let's try to press you to find the answer A, B, or C to this. And can A's raise a hand? Who is for A? So B? Okay, C? Okay, so the C wins. And I would agree with the C's. I would say that that's probably the safest way to go through this conundrum. This is how to avoid the Sila and Charybda. But I hope you agree with me. There is a profound story to be, a profound sort of lesson to be told within that. So why can't we really be sure? So it's interesting. Nobody is what in philosophy we call realist. So there is something as an experience back there, and if you notice it or not, it's there. Nobody believes that. So I'm quite relieved, actually, because that's really would be sort of strange to believe that. But still, the feeling sometimes is that like it was there, that I just noticed it. Wouldn't you agree? Like there is a feeling, like in the world, that oh, this table was there before I looked at it. So there is this sense of finding experience, not constructing. But if there were realists in this room, I would challenge them to observe the experience further. For example, not just find it, but then stick with it. Like direct your full attention to this, let's say, right hand. And perhaps play with the attention. Direct very focused attention, like a laser beam into some particular part, or perhaps like the examining mindful attention or something else. And you would really clearly see that you do something to your experience via your attention, that your attention, positioning your attention does something to the experience. Okay? So, but I think that was redundant because you already obviously noticed that. So, but that, for the scientist, that is a problem. because obviously observation, trying to observe the domain I'm interested in, does something to the domain. So how to deal with that? Okay, and I think the whole event today is sort of broadly around this big question. And we are not the first to notice this question. A very famous philosopher, Searle, actually proclaimed in '92 that this is exactly why first-person research or empirical phenomenology, i.e. research of experience, will never be a real science, exactly because of that, because of any introspection I have of my own conscious state is itself that conscious state. So that there is some inherent circularity and we cannot deal with it. And in literature, you can find different names of this problem or of this. You will see, we won't treat it as a problem later on, but let's call it a problem now, or fallacy. Sometimes in more philosophical literature, this is called refrigerator light fallacy. I hope it's clear why now. No? Because when you open the refrigerator, the light is always on. But is it on when I close it? That's the question. So this is Susan Blackmore, who wrote Oxford huge companion, is it Oxford or Cambridge? Companion to Consciousness, probably the foremost like authority on, or at least like a hub of knowledge in consciousness currently alive. And this is how she's checking the problem of the light in the refrigerator. So there are other names for that. There is also, I was told, but I could not find a source that Kant already noticed that, philosopher, and he called it excavation fallacy. Again, quite clear why, because at that time, you know, they found the pyramids, the old tombs, and as soon as you tried to explore them, you opened it and air came in after thousands of years and destroyed everything, you know. So exploration destroyed something or changed something. So Searle obviously was a sort of skeptic concerning whether, at least it was at that time. I think he changed his mind later, but at that time he was quite a skeptic on the question whether we can empirically research experience. But even the people that actually founded this field of empirical phenomenology, or at least a new wave of this field, the recent wave of this field, like Varela, Nathalie Deprat, Vermeersch, and others, even they noticed this problem. And they call it excavation fallacy. And they say, how do you know that by exploring experience with a method, you are not, in fact, deforming or even creating? Experience being what it is, what is the possible meaning of your so-called examination? Okay? So this is the problem. And some people would say, some authors would claim that this problem can be easily solved by going into memories. So let's not explore experience as it shows, as it gives yourself in the current moment, but let's explore retrospection. Let's explore past experiences. The first by William James, like a forefather of psychology, and the one that we all read now. Recently, he became, again, they are reprinting his psychology, huge textbook and so on. And Brentano, who also sort of was philosopher slash psychologist slash phenomenologist. And they both had this sort of idea. So let's go back into let's check already the experiences that already passed. So we have them somewhere in our memory, safely stored, and we can now examine them. But last 30 years clearly show that this has exactly the same refrigerator light problem as exploring live experience or experience in real time. Why? There is three very strong reasons. And first one is, I'm not going to go into it, but perhaps in my lectures we can tackle it. It's very intricate. This one also is a bit complicated because I need to explain what does it mean to explore experience. It means to do something that phenomenologists call epoché, to bracket our normal way of looking at the world, our normal way of interacting with experience, which is trying to decipher what my experience tells me about the world. So we are normally interested in what. For example, if I ask you what is here, you will know. If I ask you about the colors and how you perceive and construct these colors, you probably won't know. If I ask you, what are you thinking right now, quite easy to notice, to access. If I ask you, how are you thinking, whatever you are, a problem. So this change, we sometimes call it bracketing, where you start observing experience instead of the things in your world, we call reflection. And this reflection has to happen if you want to know about experience. Where it happens, not so much important. If we are learning about experience in a moment-by-moment basis, in a real time, then of course it has to happen immediately. But if we explore experiences from the past, again, this needs to happen. So at some point, normally when the interview starts or the journaling starts, this needs to happen. So I have to sort of transform my knowledge about what I was thinking. For example, I'm thinking about a dinner. I need to see how I was thinking that. Perhaps I had a gist of a lasagna being prepared, like a felt smell or something like that, okay? So you had to transfer into how you are experienced, how this content is being presented in your experience. So again, and then as soon as you do that, whenever you do that, you have exactly the same refrigerator light problem as I already mentioned. But I would like, and this is the most interesting part, I would say, but I would like to focus on the third reason why refrigerator light problem does not disappear when we go and explore the past experiences. And this is connected to the methods, to the ways how we try to gather phenomenological data about experience. And to illustrate this, I would like to ask you this. So some of you, I'm sure, are meditators, or at least know about some ways of practicing meditation. And I'm sure you are aware that experience of a seasoned practitioner is different from the experience of the beginner, normally, unless you're doing something really wrong, or unless you're enlightened in the first place. So how does it change? It's normally, we have a teacher of meditation here, so perhaps you could help us here. What does change with experience as you go along? Good morning. You don't have to, but...
No, I mean, I can say only from my own experience, because now that I'm talking to students who come to my meditation courses, what they say, I think, can differ from one person to another. But I would say I notice, I'm starting to notice more and more things, like especially during the years, I'm getting more and more precise in what I can notice. And also, I can see more clearly how I am the one who's constantly exhibiting some attitude towards what I'm experiencing, and how I can maybe start playing with the attitude, with my standing point from where I see the experience.
Okay, thank you. But I was actually more thinking about like 30 years of experience or 40 years. Yes, but yeah, but we are reading about these exalted teachers who spend the whole life in a monastery, and now they are in a bliss, or they can control whenever, if they want to have some content, but otherwise it's just what Buddhists would call jhanas, you know, this bliss of being one with everything and so on. So something changes, but that's also very helpful, what you said. So you notice more things. So again, check this. Could I pose exactly the same question as I did before? What actually changes? Did my experiential landscape change, or can I just observe things that I couldn't see before? This is a bit more tricky question than it was the first one, but still I'm giving you, you don't have to decide, but still there is a C option, so you can escape the trouble of deciding. But you see that the same problem remains. It's not clear, was this enlightened bliss there all the time? I just noticed it. Or perhaps the lack of internal dialogue. Is it this silent place constantly available? I just can't reach it. Or perhaps I constructed it by training and sitting in the cave and so on. I constructed it. You see, this is the same question. And now let's skip the meditation, but I think meditation is a really good example. The same goes for phenomenological research. This is Ross Halbert, I think I would say the most prominent phenomenological researchers around, or at least most methodologically clear. He's actually a psychologist, and he wrote first couple of books about statistics, and then he got spoiled and started researching experience. And I really like his approach, which is like no-nonsense, descriptive experience sampling. So we want to have random samples. We know how to get. We want to minimize the problem of retrospection, so on. So this is he now has a YouTube channel where all his interviews are recorded. So that's quite a big well of data for us to analyze. So, and he normally does like 12 or 13 interviews. So by the way, this is this iteration is the first characteristic of what we are doing. You cannot just ask about experience because nobody has either access or we are not sure about that. Either haven't constructed something or doesn't have access. But it's really informative if you check the first meeting with some person and then the last. He always does stuff with assistant. He always does it in 3 for some reason. And this, by the way, is Julian, who finished his studies with Thomas. So he's our ex-student, and now he's in Nevada, obviously, with Ross. But they always, if you compare the first and the last interview, you can see like huge change. The first one is like, I think I was thinking about strawberries. I think it was also like something like that. And then the last one is, there was the feeling of X, Y on my lip. And then I also could feel the sensation of a little bit of a trembling, blah, blah, blah. It's like a machine for reporting on experience after 12 interviews, which is quite a lot of work. So obviously something changed. And again, the same question as the meditation. Is she just noticing more things, or did this process of meditation, of research, do something to her experience? Exactly the same question. And again, the answer is we don't know. Probably both, or neither. But what we can extrapolate for this is that researching experience does something to experience, changes experience. Okay, and this is my sort of work here. I would like to know how does it do it. You know, I would like to reframe this problem, refrigerated light fallacy, into seeing it as a basic characteristic of our domain of research. So this, let's say, construction, or we call it an action, is unavoidable. So now the question is how to approach it. It's a feature, not a bug, as I see it. This is what we are dealing with. So of course, many attempts have been made to avoid this, to say, okay, yes, but if I do that kind of interview and if I take care of this and this and this, then perhaps, you know. And nobody did more to this than Ross Halbert, you know. But still, when I show him my papers, he said, yes, we completely agree. This is unavoidable, but we still don't know how to approach it. You know, we are trying to sort of research characteristic of, Husserl would say, turning towards our experience, and then see if these characteristics can tell us something about the whole data. And I would just like to mention briefly, but on Monday I will go deeper into this. We are not completely the first. When I say we, I mean empirical, current breed of empirical phenomenology. We are not completely the first to notice this problem, and also to see that solution might be in understanding the way we are asking about experience. This is the same. These are like the at least Varela is one of the fathers of this empirical phenomenology new wave, and in one of his books, their books, they said experience being what it is, what is the possible meaning of your, we showed this already, and this is Niels Bohr together with Einstein, and he said very similar stuff about quantum physics. He said the impossibility of separating behavior of atomic objects with the measuring instruments which serve to specify the conditions under which the phenomena appear. So he defined the term phenomena to be the observations obtained under specific circumstances, including an account of the whole experimental arrangement. So he would say only the result of the experiment doesn't tell us anything in quantum mechanics. We need to know what we asked the nature in order to understand the answer. Okay? And now in quantum mechanics, this is completely normal. You have the whole mathematics defines what kind of measurement was done, and then you can understand. We know that we don't have the particles are not waves or particles. They are what you ask them to be. If you are measuring, let's say, frequency, you will get a frequency. And so, and you will never be able to find the position of this article anymore. Because by asking, what are you, he would say, I'm a wave. If you measure the position, you will get the position, but you will never be able to find the frequency of this particle. So you ask, what are you? And you are asking in the particle way. And he says, yes, I'm particle. This is my position. Okay? So can you see the sort of the parallels with the quantum mechanics? So this is Varela, and he would say, all we have is experience at its own level of examination, and depending on the kinds of effort and methods brought into play. So what we get when we are studying experience is something that was brought through the way of examination. It was not something that was there. The way you checked your hand has something to do with what you discovered. Okay? So this is all I will say now about what we are doing. But then somehow mostly, this is mostly Aleš's fault, because he went for a year abroad and then came back and brought the news. We discovered that actually we could expand some of these findings broader into a broad research of mind. And the guy who was first to notice that is Martin Orne. He, in, I think, 1962, published this thing on the social psychology of the psychological experiment. And he introduced the term demand characteristic. I would just briefly, because probably you will tell more about that, but just briefly introduce what he did. And you can stop me, because if I miss something, Aleš will correct me. So he was actually, he didn't expect to find any of this. He was interested in hypnosis and so on, and he was trying to devise experiments where subjects would become really annoyed or bored and leave the experiment. So something really tedious and boring and not pleasant. I think one of them was that there was a huge pile of sheets there, and the task was take a sheet, read it, fulfill whatever it says, and then throw it away. And every sheet says, take a sheet, read it. So it was like a loop. And then he would say, we were really, really surprised that these subjects would just go on for hours and hours and hours and do all kinds of tedious tasks. And then he says also, removal of the one-way screen, that they were very popular at that time, I think, in psychology. All these fancy one-way screens did not tend to make much difference. So even when the people saw the researchers, they would still go on and on and on. And the only conclusion they could make, and I think it's a really good one, was that subjects would invariably attribute considerable meaning to their performance. So they would say something like, oh, this is probably an endurance test. I have to be as sort of, I have to go on with this as long as I can. Or this must be a really test of my some kind of skills. So people were actually constructing the meaning and then trying to follow this meaning. Okay? And then he started playing with this idea, and this is an interesting one. He played with his students, obviously, the way that he would say to a couple of people, why don't you do some push-ups for me here? And they would say, what? No, I'm not doing push-ups. Go away. But if he said, we are doing an interesting psychological experiment, yes, do some push-ups. Oh, yes, of course, immediately. So, and he would start finding that perhaps an experimental setting is the strongest stimulus of them all. And obviously it was quite cruel to his students. So this is his conclusions. He would say, along with the traditionally defined experimental variables, which is like stimulus and task and we need to take into account the perceived demand characteristics. So this is perhaps good to ponder on, because the demand characteristic is really hard to translate in Slovenian. So so the question is, what are subjects perceiving as a demand when they get into the experimental setting? But now the name has stuck. We really have a hard time to translate it in Slovenian, but whatever. So in other ways, social situation called experiment is a stimulus. It doesn't contain, is perhaps a stronger, sometimes a stronger stimulus. And compare this to the quantum mechanics and to empirical phenomenological troubles, and there's not so much difference. There is a difference, because I think in other kinds of research within cognitive science, you can think of escaping this, of making the experiment as or as demand characteristic proof as possible. We cannot do that. I don't believe we can do that in experience research. But otherwise, I would say there are some parallels. But let's leave to other speakers to judge about that. I would just like to end this by some continuation of Orner's research, something that I would suggest our students, because we will have a little challenge made out of this paper. So Weber, Cook, and others, they sort of tried to identify types of reactions on psychological when faced with the setting of psychological experiments, and they detected or identified 4 types. And one of them, the most common, they called the good subject. So the good subject is a subject. I might distort this a little bit. We will read the paper. So the good subject is the one who tries to find out what is the hypothesis of the experiment and confirm it. Okay? And I think the best, and now I'm putting this slide in just because of our study of emotions currently. So there are a lot of more examples. So, but this is a good example of prevalence of good subjects. This is the very known OASIS open effective standardized image set. So these are the images that are supposed to elicit emotions and are quite widely used for experiments. But the authors of this actually tried a very interesting thing. They said they created 2 sets of instructions. Half of their subjects got image-focused instructions, and the other internal state-focused instructions. So one half was asked, what do you think? I'm making this a little bit up, but I think I'm not distorting the gist of the research. What emotions do you feel when faced with this picture? Another half, what do you think this picture represents? Do you see what I mean? So the other half actually was asked, what is on this picture? They didn't care about their emotional state. But the first half, the second half, internal state-focused instructions, they were actually asked about their emotions. But the results were completely I mean, at least statistically comparable. So obviously, the second half, they were pretty much guessing what they should experience. So I would say there was a prevalence of good subjects there. So another, I'm just going briefly through the rest of them. The faithful subject, this is the one who is not so much trying to find out what is the hypothesis, but really strictly follow the instructions. I have to do this, I have to do this, and believes that then everything will be fine. And then we have a negativistic subject. I think I am the prime example of that tries to disprove the hypothesis. We have some soulmates of mine, I think, in this generation, and I think we appreciate that. And then we have a apprehensive subject who is, I think the name tells all. Instead of reading this, I have this fantastic, I'm not, it's completely anonymous, so we are not saying where I had the name, but I deleted it. So this is, just to read it, I'm not going to read it, but this is the description of the first, being the subject in an fMRI study for the first time. And you will get the slides, you can check it, or perhaps not, we'll see. So, but it's perhaps just the final part is really after an hour and a half of first enjoying and admiring researchers and then suffering. Well, finally, the principal investigator told me that the final block of trials is ahead of me. I did not even make an attempt at solving it. I counted down the 20 trials so that the whole experience would end as soon as possible. All that I experienced was to leave the coil after an hour and a half and remove the cage, and for my ear compressed by air force to stop hurting. So I would say that this experiment did something to the results, I mean, the experimental setting. So I'm finishing here. I would just like to, this is an interesting paper that, like, what was it, 2002? Is it 2 or 12? 12, is it 12? 2012. This author said, well, why is this demand characteristic so rarely mentioned within psychological experimentation literature? And they did this sort of a study, how much they checked experimental bias and demand characteristic, how much it was. And you see it really was quite high a couple of years after Orne's sort of discovery, and then goes down. Although I have to say, after they published, it went up again. I checked this on the Google Ngram, but now it's going down again. So somehow, despite the fact that most of the psychologists who know about it say we must consider demand characteristics, somehow we don't, because it's difficult, I guess. But we will hear our colleagues. So I'm very interested about that. So just before I finish, I would just like to announce the two lectures. I really wanted to give your photo together, but I thought perhaps you might not like it together with Peter's. Aleš is the last speaker for today. He was working together for a year or more, I think, with this guy. And I think he was my source to learn that this demand characteristics and all this kind of stuff is being researched, not very prominently, but this guy actually made it quite prominent because he published, Aleš will tell us what he published, but sort of an instrument to measure suggestibility or something close to that. I'm sorry, you will correct me, of course. And he published in Collabra, which is a newfound psychological journal, but also in Nature, Behavior, and so on. So now we are re-examining, I think, this stuff because we have some instrument to work with, although some of us are not completely satisfied with this. And I recently, last August, actually learned that there is a whole lab at the King's College London which deals with things adjacent to this, not completely only with demand characteristics, but with demand characteristics such as suggestion, placebo, nocebo, and so on. And I feel really, really, really honored and happy to have a member of this lab here, and she's the next speaker. So I think that's all from my part. What's my timing?